Hello, and thank you so much for tuning in to MCW Wisdom, Wisdom for Modern Christian Women. Be sure to find us at www.mcwwisdom.com. This message is called Not Guilty, and it is a continuation from the message I did called feeling stuck in your life. You might be feeling stuck because of condemnation or feelings of guilt. Why is it important for us to talk about this and for you to understand how condemnation is influencing your life? It is because condemnation keeps you distant from God. It makes you feel bad, makes you feel guilty, makes you feel wrong, like you are too corrupt, too sinful to approach God or to expect God to do anything for you. So what happens is the enemy to your soul. Oh, I know you don't like to say Satan or the devil, but we're talking about Christian lingo here, Christian language and Christian ideas. So that's what we're talking about. What the devil wants to do is to make you feel defeated. He wants to sap your faith in yourself and in God, so that you will not experience victory in life the way that Christ wants you to as a follower. If you are so loaded with guilt, it makes you inactive in a lot of areas of your life because you feel like, oh, why should I even try? Oh, it's not going to work out for me. You know, I'm too this or I'm too that. And so I might as well just give it up. And that is a position you do not want to be in because God needs us to get his will done on the earth. And if you are feeling that way, and if you are feeling so unmotivated and depressed, because condemnation and feelings and guilt can lead to depression, which makes you just want to lay out and not do anything, then how are you going to be usable in the service of God and in what he wants you to accomplish? So, not guilty. Let's go ahead to John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. And this is the very famous passage of the woman who was caught in adultery. And so I want to just take a moment to read through these verses and pick out some key points for us, especially as modern Christian women, because sometimes it happens. So here is a woman who was caught in the very act of adultery. So beginning with verse 1, it reads, Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, but early in the morning he went back to the temple, and all the people came to him, and he sat and taught them. And this is the New Century Version, the NCV of the Bible. So he had gone up to the Mount of Olives. Let's paint the scene. But early in the morning, he went back to the temple. He went back to the church, right? He is now at the church. And all of the people came to the church to hear him and to hear what he was teaching. Verse 3, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery. They forced her to stand before the people. She was having sex. Let's get real about it. She was having sex with someone who was not her husband. She could have been an unmarried woman, a single woman like you and I, who just decided to kick it with somebody. Or she could have actually been married and was having extracurricular sex with somebody else's man or with another man, right? So she was being sexual, and they caught her, which means they were in the process of doing the adultery, of doing the act, when they snatched this woman up. So now they are trying to humiliate her. Do you think they told her, oh, go ahead, honey, put your clothes on. We're just going to bring you before the people in Jesus to make a point? No, they snatched her up while she was in the act, right? So now she is being forced to stand, probably naked, or at least near naked. She's probably standing naked before Jesus and all of these people. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine having your most intimate acts, your most intimate secrets put on display? Now, with porn tapes that girls and women are making, they're putting themselves on display. And people are putting it on the internet. So some of you can relate to the idea of having your most intimate moments put on full display in public. I can't. But that's what's happening here. So she is being humiliated in front of all of these people. They said to Jesus, verse 4, "Teacher, this woman was caught having sexual relations with a man who is not her husband." She was having sex. Now, was she having sex by herself? No. Where was the man she was having sex with? And this is where we get into hegemony and patriarchy and sexism, right? Because the woman was brought before the people to be punished, but the man who was involved in the act with her was not. So again, a lot of the times we as women are made to feel guilty. We have scarlet letters stamped on us for being sexual, for being emotional, for living within our femininity and womanhood. That gets to be a punishment. And so a lot of us as women feel guilty. We are made to feel judged or ashamed and shameful for being a woman. Let's go into verse 5. "The law of Moses commands that we stone to death every woman who does this. What do you say we should do?" They were asking this to trick Jesus so that they could have some charge against him. So this woman was a pawn in the Pharisees' dirty little trick. Who were the Pharisees? The lawyers, the keepers of the law. They were the church folk. Basically, they were the church folk, and they were trying to entrap Jesus, but they used this poor woman as a pawn in order to do it. But Jesus bent over and started writing on the ground with his finger. He didn't automatically say anything to him. He just got quiet. And a lot of the times when people are accusing you, you need to just get quiet. You need to just take a moment, think, reflect, say nothing, right? So if you don't argue back, there is no argument. Verse 7, when they continued to ask Jesus their question, he raised up and said, "Anyone here who has never sinned can throw the first stone at her." Then Jesus bent over again and wrote on the ground. We don't need to know what he was writing on the ground. He could have just been doodling. But what was happening is that he knew the power of containing himself and of being quiet, because he was so filled with truth that as the people were around him, the atmosphere began to shift so that the truth was going to manifest in that situation. God's truth was going to manifest in that situation. So basically, they kept badgering him. He was doodling on the ground. They kept badgering him, and he finally said, "Anyone here who has never sinned can throw the first stone at her." That's short and sweet, to the point. He wasn't trying to argue against their intellect. He wasn't trying to come across as being wiser than they were, because they felt like they were smart and wise. So he let them have that. He just made one simple statement that cut to the heart and soul of everybody there. How do we know? Because those who heard Jesus began to leave one by one. First the older men and then the others. If any of you have never done anything wrong, that's what sin is, then you can throw a stone at her. The old men went first, I guess, because the old men are like, oh, I've done so much wrong and I'm still here, so let me just go, right? So the old men began to leave first, and then everybody else began to leave. Jesus was left there alone with the woman standing before him. Again, she might have been nude or partially nude, standing before Jesus. Jesus raised up again and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one judged you guilty? Has no one condemned you?" She answered, "No one, sir." Then Jesus said, "I also don't judge you guilty. You may go now, but don't sin anymore. Not guilty, right? Not guilty. So that means you need to give other people mercy the way God has displayed mercy to you, because you have not been punished for every wrong thing you have done. Yes, you have done some pretty wicked things. You have thought some pretty wicked things. And a lot of the times you were not punished for that the way that you should have been. Go, but don't sin anymore. Go, but don't do the same thing you were just caught doing, right? They could have stoned this woman. They could have said, forget what Jesus talking about. He writing in the dirt. He is not listening to us. Let's just go ahead and stone this woman. And Jesus would have had to respect that because that was the law. But instead, they were so cut by what he said that they just left. So if you are freed from some wrong thing that you have done and you do not receive punishment, you do not want to go back and commit the same act. Quit doing the wrong thing that you got caught doing. Not guilty. So what happens is that when you get a touch from Jesus, you begin to change in your mind and in your heart. That's your mind, will, your emotions. You begin to shift in your soul so that you don't want to keep doing the wrong things that you've been doing. You absolutely want to change. And that is what repentance is. When you literally do not want to do this thing anymore. You are sorry for what you've done, and you take all steps you need in order to not do it again. That is repentance. That is what is meant by go and sin no more. Okay, so hopefully you got something out of this message. So visit us at www.mcwwisdom.com.